Ryan, welcome to Millionaire University. So happy to have you here today. I'm truly excited about what we're going to talk about. And I don't even own a restaurant. I kind of like dabbled in starting one with my husband once upon a time in another lifetime. But I'm stoked because you're a systems guy. We're going to share how to really build a profitable, scalable restaurant empire. So, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about restaurants and I love talking about systems. So you'll get me in what I call rare form, in my natural state.
Your natural habitat. I love it. Okay, so you've gone personally from chef to restaurant owner to becoming what is now known as the restaurant boss. So, for you, what was the most pivotal moment that made you realize restaurants needed better systems to be profitable and scalable? Like when did that kind of come into the picture?
How much time do we have?
Yeah, loaded
So
question.
so in all seriousness, there was a moment. I was given some really great advice when I was young, and the advice I was given by some chefs and just some successful business people was take the worst job you can with the best company possible in anything you do. And
Mm,
so my first job cooking was in a five-star, five-diamond hotel in Beverly Hills. Most people don't have that opportunity, but I did, and I grabbed it and I took it. And I remember the chef was interviewing me, and he's like, "You're 15 years old. Like, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "I want to work for you. I want to work for this place." And he's like, "Fine, let's go." And so early in my career, like before culinary school, my summer jobs, during culinary school, and then after culinary school, I spent 7 years at this property. I only knew how to do things one way, and that's absolutely the correct way. Five-star, five-diamond. Now today rating systems are a little different, but back in the 90s, this was the upper echelon. We were a top 10 restaurant in the United States. And then I go and work for a couple of independent restaurants before I go and open up my own place. And I noticed that things were different. I noticed that like lots of shortcuts are taken. I noticed that things don't quite go as smoothly as they did. And at first I was like, well, that's them.
mm,
That's not me, that's them. I will still do it the right way. And then I went and I partnered and opened up some of my own restaurants. And I'm like, wait. Even me, even the guy that knows how to do it right is struggling to do it right. And so that's when I kind of realized um, this is more of a habitual thing. This is more of a business model thing. This is an industry wide thing. This isn't just the people I was working for. And so I had to kind of relearn my skills. Like I knew how to follow systems, but I didn't know how to build them.
mm,
They're two completely different things, by the way, right? I look at an
yeah.
airline pilot and an aeronautical engineer. Like Boeing designs airplanes, but they don't fly them. The people who fly them don't design them. And so I'm jumping ahead here, but a lot of mistakes I see restaurants make is I have a friend who's a manager at this big corporate chain and they've been there for 20 years and they're all about systems. They're going to come into my restaurant and build all of my systems for me. Well, the person who builds the airplane is very different than the person who flies. The
Mm.
person who builds the systems is very different than the one who follows them. So again, I had to relearn that. And that's when I was like, through some other things that if we had hours, we could talk about. I was basically like, you know what? There's an opportunity here. Restaurants need help. I kind of figured this out. I tested it out. I started helping some people and the results were great. So that's how
Yeah.
I got to coaching.
Interesting. Okay, so I love that you gave us the backstory, and I think there's like not a missing piece, but I just want to know a little bit about that transition that you kind of talked about, where if your passion was cooking, your passion was actually like being the restaurant owner. Did you ever have that point then after working in some of these other restaurants, working for private different situations than the five-star restaurant? Did you actually go in and start your own restaurant? Did you implement those systems working for other people still, and then you had those to streamline into your own? Or like, you know what
So
I'm
at that
asking?
point,
Like the transition.
I had evaporated my partnerships. I was not a restaurant owner operator when I started my coaching and consulting.
Mm,
Um, it was a series of events that led to that. But basically, when those restaurants ceased operations, my partner and I split. Well, they didn't cease operate. My partner and I split up. I gave him the restaurants and I left. Some people started reaching out to me in the community who were like, "Hey, like you did amazing things over there. We'd love to talk with you." And I was like, "I'm not going to come work for you. Like yours isn't Like, that's not what I want to do. They're like, no, we want you to help us do the things you did there. And I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah,
So
I'll do
like
that part.
I Googled like, how do I consult? And then like I read a whole bunch of books, and then I like literally, but it's again, it's a funny story. But
Yeah.
no, basically people reached out to me, and that's how I got started coaching. What's funny, what's serendipitous about it is I've always had this desire. Like, I've been a Tony Robbins student, like I've always been into professional and personal development from a very young age. And so I've always had this burning desire to help and coach and lead and mentor. And so when the opportunity presented itself, it felt really good, and it felt really natural to me that, yeah, this is the direction I want to go.
Cool. So as you were going into those new scenarios after having worked in the 5-star, were you adapting a lot of the strategies based on what you had seen and why it was a 5-star restaurant? Or is there even just some understanding of not everybody can function like a 5-star, so there are different systems and strategies that have to go into, different levels of restaurants?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are certain things, like the example I always use is, it was so easy. If something broke in a hotel, I hit 0 on the phone, an operator picks up, and I say, can I talk to maintenance? And then I tell maintenance what's going on. 10 minutes later, some guy with a tool belt is up in the kitchen. He takes a look at it. If he can't fix it, it's his problem now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he'll call out the repair person, he'll work with them, he'll schedule. Like, that's not a reality in independent restaurants. So yeah, systems are all very different. But again, it was that mindset. What I try to teach people is, there's a mindset of, we are going to do it right, of we are going to create a system for it. We are going to build a culture that's built on systems, and then just adapting them is easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've probably seen, and I think you've mentioned this in all of the many things that you've put out in your coaching online and everything, that a lot of restaurant owners focus more on just getting through the day. I mean, I think this can explain many entrepreneurs. We focus on getting through the day versus actually making money. So what are some of the key metrics that every restaurant owner should be tracking daily to impact their scalability?
So daily sales, in a perfect world, daily labor. We should be working off of some kind of a budget. It can be as simple as, I think I'm going to do 30,000 in sales this week, and I have a 30% labor cost target. So then I have, I don't know, what is that? That's like $9,000 available to me to spend on labor this week. And so then when you make your weekly schedule, you should be able to very simply cost it out with the tools we have available today, or even on an Excel spreadsheet, to know, hey, one, did I overschedule? Like, even if I execute this schedule perfectly, and even if I execute my sales perfectly, am I going to overspend, or did I schedule correctly per day? And then if you schedule correctly per day, you should be able to daily just look, did we hit our sales today, and did we execute our labor plan? And so daily, it's really sales and labor. When we start talking weekly, that's when we can start looking at cost of goods sold and some other factors. But prime cost, which is total cost of goods sold, total labor, are the two most important things that a restaurant could be managing, whether that's daily, weekly, quarterly, monthly. Those two numbers together represent 60% of your profit and loss statement, 60% of your expenses. And those are the two most controllable and manageable numbers in your restaurant. And so literally, for every dollar that comes in, 60 cents in a healthy restaurant, 60 cents is going back out for purchases and labor. Unhealthy restaurants, as much as 75%, sometimes 80%. And so you control that, you're controlling a majority of your expenses.
Hmm. So there's kind of this trope, right? That like you want to sink money into a business that isn't very profitable, start a restaurant, right? Like I mentioned, my husband and I, we kind of co-started this restaurant, and we saw the writing on the wall very early on that this is not sustainable to support two families in a partnership situation in startup mode. Like, we're being pretty crazy. Now, that being said, we probably could have seen it through. We would have figured it out as we went. But with that kind of understanding, I love that you're coming into this space and saying, hold on, that doesn't have to be universally true. We just need to think a little bit differently about the way that we are building this treat it like a business? Because are you seeing that a lot of times people are like, I have recipes. People are telling me I should start a restaurant. This sounds so glamorous, but they're actually not entrepreneurs.
I think what you just said, which I'm laughing because you're right, we laugh at things that are true.
Yeah.
Not because it's funny, but because it's true, is treat it like a business. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% correct. Like people come into restaurants as passion projects, they come into restaurants as hobbies. And I think that happens because most businesses, we need a very tangible skill. We need a license. We need training, like at a government or commercial level, doctor, lawyer, CPA. Like, let's open up a restaurant. It's like, well, I can cook. Like, what else do I need? Right. I joke, like, I think we should have to have, like, you have to have a business license to open up a business. Like, you should have to have some basic understandings, but we don't. And that's great. It's a free society. We should be able to do whatever we want. But yes, like you're opening up a restaurant, you're opening up a business. This is not a hobby. Cooking at home and cooking in a restaurant are not the same thing. Managing a team of people and having them cook for you is not the same thing as making a pot of chili at home.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just because you won the local chili cook-off and just because your friends tell you your chili is amazing and you should open a restaurant and sell this chili doesn't mean it's a good idea. So yeah, let's hook up with a mentor. If you are not experienced in business, you may be an employee and you may make very good money and you may work for a big business, but that doesn't mean that you are an experienced entrepreneur. If you are not experienced in starting businesses, hook up with a mentor. I mean, reach out to me, reach out to people like me, and just ask some questions. For a couple $100, you could save millions by like, what should I be thinking about? What type of market research should I do? How do I establish if this is a good idea? And then you got to look at, like, can this be done profitably?
Yeah.
The restaurant business model is broken. I'm just going to flat out say that. Like, if you open up a restaurant, even if you're busy, but you open up a restaurant today, similar to the normal everyday restaurant that exists today, you are entering into the death phase, the end of life, the geriatric phase of a business model.
Wow.
The business model of high amount of human labor is broken because labor used to be very cheap in restaurants.
Yeah.
Before COVID, you could put a whole bunch of servers on the floor and pay them $2 an hour. You could put a whole bunch of cooks in the kitchen and pay them barely minimum wage. Most restaurants would pay them minimum wage and then have them work 12 hours a day with no overtime, cash under the table. Like, that business model worked. The owner could make a lot of money. No one's doing that work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if we keep paying labor more and more money and keep requiring a model that needs a ton of labor, there's nothing left for the owner. So it's a broken business model. So again, like, those are the things that we have to look at. We can't just look at this successful restaurant or this busy restaurant across the street from us and say, well, they're busy, they must be making a ton of money, I'm going to do what they're doing. Just because they're busy doesn't mean they're making any money.
Yeah. Ooh, good insight. And I love that. I love that you're kind of straight up saying, like, yeah, if you go into this the way people typically have, that's why the trope exists, right? It's like the fastest way to just lose a bunch of money. But it is encouraging to hear if you've been able to come into this space and find that there are ways to systematize and make things happen differently. That's really good news for people who have a proclivity to cook and they do know they have something and they do see a vision in which they can own a restaurant, and that's like their dream. So walk us through
You can make a ton of money in the restaurant business. I don't want what you're saying and what is out in the industry or out in the world to be truth. It's not true. I mean, we joke the fastest way to lose $1 million is open up a restaurant that costs $1 million to open. Like, I don't want those to be the reality, and they're not.
Yeah.
If you follow the right set of rules.
Yeah. Tell us what those rules are. Tell us how things have altered and how in a post-COVID world things need to adjust and how you kind of come in and help people build a totally different business model than what is very outdated and doesn't work.
So the first thing we have to do is we have to look at the challenge I just stated, which is labor. We have to ask ourselves the question of like, do we adapt our current restaurant to a new world of less labor? Or do we build a new restaurant that naturally requires less labor? The better example I use for this is, let's take like robotics and automation. You will never build in our lifetime, you will never build, and no company will ever build a robot that will replace a cook. A cook that flips burgers, drops fries, makes pizza, spreads mayonnaise on toast for a BLT, opens up the oven, cooks bacon. Like, that is a skill. That is human being skill.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do? Well, we have robots that make pizza, but they don't make pizza, cook fries, and burgers. We have robots that can do fried rice. We have robots that can do stir fries. We have robots that can do fried chicken, but they can't do fried chicken, pizza, burgers. And so now what we're starting to see is, again, maybe you're not ready for a robot, but you have to start thinking, what can I do at my restaurant that will, one, require less labor, and very nearly in the future replace that labor with a machine?
Hmm.
And so, like, we start to see restaurants now that have more kiosks. McDonald's, you used to walk into McDonald's, they had this long counter and there'd be 7 cashier stations. And remember, you'd kind of pick which line, and I'd get in one line, and my dad would get in another line, and my brother would get in another line. And whichever line went faster is where we would order. You walk into McDonald's now, there's one cashier station that nobody attends to, and there's 9 kiosks. Well, you might be saying to yourself, I can't do that in my restaurant because my menu is so big and there's so many customizations. And that's exactly my point.
Mm.
If you don't adapt your menu or build a restaurant that you could use kiosks, one day you are going to be priced out of the marketplace.
Mm.
Because it starts with McDonald's, and then it goes to Chipotle, and then it goes to Chick-fil-A, and then it goes to everyone else. And one day you're selling a burger for $23 and they're selling a burger for $5, and you're out of business because they have replaced expensive human beings with a machine. Go ahead, send me the emails. Tell me I'm a horrible person. Tell me you're trying to replace humans. This has happened in every industry since the dawn of time. We used to have farmers who farm fields, and now we have machines that do it. And unless you want to pay $300 for an ear of corn, you better be okay with the fact that a machine harvests your corn and not a person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening.
Yeah.
Sorry,
well,
I know I'm gonna get that email from that person who's like, you're talking about firing people, and yes, but it is true.
Well, and it's not even at the point where you have to fire people, because a lot of people aren't even applying for jobs like this. We're not in a shortage of necessarily jobs. We're in a shortage of employees willing to do the jobs. And so I think you can you have to pick the hill you want to die on. And if you don't adapt with what's happening and the way people are even wanting to earn their money, like, that creates different jobs. It's just a totally different industry, a totally different framework that we're going to be looking at with people able to earn a living. So it's kind of like, don't
and really
be left
quickly,
behind.
if you are on the other side of this, if you are the person who's saying, like, I'm a server in a restaurant right now, and you're talking about replacing it with a kiosk, like, one, there will always be a restaurant that needs you. So either adapt your skills to those higher end, more touch point restaurants, so that way you are working in a restaurant and you will never be replaced by a kiosk,
Mm-hmm.
or start learning some new skills, start pursuing education, so when that day comes, you're not caught off guard. That would be mine.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some other ways? I think that in and of itself is such a powerful example of things that are already being replaced. People are already being replaced by. What other systems can we incorporate into a restaurant business specifically to help this become a more profitable business venture?
So when I talk about systems, I talk about anything that you do twice. If you do it once, don't create a system for it. If you did it a second time, you need a system. And so anything that we do twice, meaning someone requests time off and you're like, in your head or in your phone, you're like putting that reminder, Well, that's going to happen again. Someone else is going to request time off. You probably need a better system than in your head. So you need a system for that. Closing out the restaurant at the end of the day, you're going to do that more than once. So you need a checklist of do this, do that, do that. My favorite thing, like someone says to me, I remember this was like 5 or 6 years ago, a client was like, I came in today and like we were the French fries were frozen and this was frozen and that was frozen and like no one pulled them out of the freezer last night. I'm like, do you have a defrost list? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, if you pull stuff out of the freezer and put it in the refrigerator every night to be prepared for the next day, do you have a list of what those things are? And he's like, no. I'm like, sorry, I forgot this is a podcast. What you're not seeing are my facial reactions, which are like, well, then go build one. And then literally the next week he comes back. He's like, I literally put a piece of paper handwritten on the refrigerator that said, these are the 10 things that we need to make sure we have in the refrigerator every night. We haven't had a problem in the last 5 days since I did that. I'm like, okay, great. Like now let's make that system better. Like there's technology we can use. There's more format. But the point is like, that's a system. Mm-hmm. So people, I think sometimes people say to me like, Ryan, like I need every system. Like what are the systems I need in a restaurant? I'm like, if you do it twice, you need a system. So again, just really quick, things like opening procedures, closing procedures, time off requests, employee meal plans. What is your process for employee meals? Do employees eat for free? Do they get a 50% discount? Can they order anything on the menu? Can they come in on their day off? Do they get their discount on their day off? Are they allowed to drink alcohol? Like those are all things that we need a system, a process, a procedure, a plan, whatever you want to call it. How we do that, I'm a fan of simplicity. Type it up in a Word document, stick it in a folder somewhere. That's good enough for me. I have more advanced methods and software that I use, but like if you don't have a meal policy now, open up ChatGPT, say, hey, chat, here are the things I want in a meal policy, and it'll create a meal policy for you, edit it, print it out, train your team, and now you have a meal policy. And if you don't have a time off request policy, do the same thing. Say, hey, chat, this is what I want in a time off request policy. And then you have like this shouldn't be super difficult.
Yeah. Well, obviously you have resources that people can go check out as well, but I love that you brought up ChatGPT because sometimes the barrier of entry with AI is not knowing what you don't know. And so I think even just giving those tangible examples of like, think through and obviously I would hope somebody starting a restaurant has at least worked for one, start paying attention to like the things that were already set up and in place and maybe the things that weren't set up and in place and just start going through the list of like, oh, I kind of took that for granted because you even saying like the meal policy, I've worked for restaurants. Somebody had to come up with that. Somebody had to
Can I address that for a second?
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you. I would hope that someone who is starting a restaurant has worked in a restaurant. 2 things though I would add. One, some of my most successful restaurant operators did not. And again, I'm not saying that in any judgment way. I'm just saying like some very successful restaurant operators have not, and it would be great if they did. Some of my least successful restaurant operators did work in restaurants, and so they brought a lot of, Ryan, I don't need a checklist. I've worked in 20 restaurants. We didn't have checklists. I don't need a time off request. I've spent 20 years in restaurants and done it without that. So just because you had success or the restaurant you worked at was successful or you thought was successful doesn't mean that they're doing it the right way. So make sure that you're studying success. What I always say is, there's a formula for success and there's a formula for stress, struggle, and overwhelm. You're following one of them. If you're getting stress, struggle, and overwhelm, you are following the wrong formula. Change it. If you're getting success, you're doing great. Keep going. Follow the formulas, but reach out to people who have had success and do emulate what they do. Don't emulate what the general public or the restaurant you worked at once in your life is doing. Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, that's really
I wanted
good
to address
advice.
that when you said that.
That's good advice. And it's something I'm glad you brought up because there's people who might be listening to this saying, I have never worked in a restaurant, but I'm really intrigued by the business idea. I can totally see everything that Ryan is saying. I think this is actually really brilliant. I know somebody who should totally be working in a restaurant. I don't want to work one. I don't know how to cook, but I'm a really smart business person. And so I can plug this into a system. And it's like my husband, he has a background in the arts and he has a background in marketing. And he's incredibly successful at that because he can bring in nuance and things that have only ever like been narrow focused on the thing. So I think just along the lines of what you're saying, there's power in being able to bring outside perspective and not having the habits. And then there's also power in knowing what you don't know, right? Or
Right.
knowing things that people might not know they don't know. So yeah, I appreciate that. So as you're going into this, I think I actually want to ask that question with the partnership. Do you have a lot of successful people that you've mentored where that does work? I know that partnerships can be really tricky, but have you seen people come together who one is more like the operator and one is more the management and the overseer of things, the business piece, if you will? And how does that work?
Yes, with assistance from people who know what they're doing, setting up your rules and your operation systems, like your business. I don't mean like, how do we open up the restaurant? I mean, like, this is your job. This is your job description as a partner. This is your salary. This
Mm-hmm.
is your equity in exchange for this. This is now the other person. This is your job. This is your salary. This is your equity in exchange for this. And we have to be willing to fire our partners. So the one thing
Mm,
I say is, even let's take a simple partnership. Let's say you needed a couple $100,000 to open a restaurant. You both put in $100,000, you're 50-50 equity partners. Let's just say that that's the model. And one of you is the chef and one of you is the operator. Let's just say it's super simple, right? Straightforward. Your chef gets a salary, even though they're a partner, and your restaurant manager gets a salary, even though they're a partner, because if the chef absolutely sucks at their job as a partner and ends up going on vacation and coming into work late and hiring a whole bunch of cooks so they don't have to work, which affects the P&L, which doesn't allow profit for the partners, well, then you need to fire that chef. Now, he's still your business partner. He's
mm,
still he or she is still a 50% equity partner in your business. And they deserve the perks of that because they put their money in and they did their job, or they did their job as a partner. But as a chef, they utterly failed and they deserve to be fired. And now that salary will go to another chef. So we have to start with rules like that. We have to
mm,
start with, just because you're a partner doesn't mean you're immune to termination, doesn't mean you're immune to your job. Look, Steve Jobs got fired from the company he started. Now he
mm.
came back and but the point is, like, founders get fired from their companies all the time, but they don't lose their stock. They just lose their job and their salary.
Hmm.
So you need to find professionals. You do not start partnerships over a bourbon and a handshake and then put a couple $100,000 into a bank account and say, we're going to be 50-50 on this. This is going to be awesome. No, it won't be awesome. You won't be friends anymore and you'll both have no money. There
Okay, I
are
love that.
attorneys that do this and they do it very well. Go hire one.
Yeah. And I think that message applies to any business partnerships. I think a lot of people skip that step. I love that. I love that you explained that. I think that is really clear and makes a lot of sense for how a lot of business partnerships can totally crumble. And this is a great example that's very tangible with the operator, the chef. But yeah, I've seen even in my marriage, sometimes I'm like, man, we need to have like equal equity, but we need to be able to fire. I think we kind of have unofficially, right? Not on paper, but
I mean, it would be no
yeah.
different than this may be viewed as a terrible example. I hope it's not, but like, maybe if you have a stay-at-home spouse and originally some of the expectations of that stay-at-home spouse are like taking care of house chores, keeping the house clean, cooking some meals. Well, maybe you determine that as a marriage, it's healthier for me to, or for us to hire a housekeeper to come in once a week and take care of some of the dirty jobs. Well, you agree on that as a partnership. You fire your spouse from that job, and now you use other resources like money to do that work. And now you have a healthier marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
think it's no different, right? When we're partners, it's about the health of the business, not about the protection of a job.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. Okay, so when we're in it, when we've started something, I mean, I'm speaking really primarily in this question for on behalf of the new business owner, the new restaurant owner that's just getting started. And I think we started off the conversation with we need to know the numbers. And you talked about some of those ratios of you need to know your labor cost and your anticipated, you need to have a basic budget. Can we go more into that too about what really you should be looking at in terms of margins and what the
Sure.
expectation should be at different stages of starting this business?
Yeah. So generally speaking, right, obviously let's start with revenue at the 100%. And then what I like to do is I like to take, again, I'm leaving some stuff out, but generally 30% for cost of goods sold, 30% for labor. That's your prime cost. It could be 40-20, it could be 20-40, but basically 60% of every dollar that comes in of your revenue is going to go to cost of goods sold and labor. Now, again, these are healthy numbers, not unhealthy numbers. And they're going to vary depending on the type of business, but generally 60% goes to cost of goods sold and labor. Then I say about 10% goes to rent and marketing. I put rent and marketing together because you can have a really bad piece of property. You're going to spend a lot of money on marketing to attract people to your location. You could have a rock star A+ location that costs you a fortune and you don't really need to spend any money on marketing. So really quick on locations, a lot of times young, new restaurant operators are like, man, I really like this place, but it's so expensive. It's expensive for a reason. You want expensive real estate. Generally speaking, don't look at rent as a static number and say it's expensive, I'm going to go with the cheaper. We do that with bubble gum. We do that with milk. We don't do that with rent. We look at rent and go, it's expensive because it's awesome. We're going to be successful there. So 10%-ish to rent and marketing. I skipped one, but it doesn't matter. About 6 to 8% for operational expenses, what I call direct operating expenses. These are things that are controllable, but they're not cost of goods sold or labor. Chemicals are controllable, but they're not cost of goods sold or labor. Things like that, to-go containers, repairs and maintenance, stuff like that. So now we're at what, about 77, 78. Then I like to reserve about 15% for just non-controllables. These are just going to be attorneys, just stuff you buy, equipment, supplies, professional fees, train, like just stuff, which leaves, roughly 8-10% in profit. Some restaurants will do better than that. Some won't, but that's generally how I like to break it down. If we're just doing some back of the napkin math on a restaurant, 10% profit is a decent starting point. I will caveat that with, if you're going to do less than $1 million in sales, you will probably not see profit. You will see a salary for an owner operator, but you will not see an operator salary and owner profit. Generally speaking, at less than $1 million. When we get to about $1 million to $1.5 million, you can start to see 5%-ish. This is all very general profit. When you start to get like above $1.5 million, you can start to see more healthy numbers. But there is a volume factor that is very real to restaurants. It depends on the concept and everything else. But low volume restaurants, like I just see it a lot. I see a lot of like electricians or plumbers or doctors who are like, I'm going to buy a franchise. And then when that franchise might do $800,000 a year, that's not going to return a profit unless you're the operator. It's just probably not. So like, depending on what your goals are, if you don't want to be the owner operator, you need to be looking at something, like you said, high enough volume, like you said at the beginning, right? 2 families trying to split income off of this one concept, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless it was high volume.
So I'm assuming, I mean, we're talking to beginning level for myself right now. I'm assuming this is not something that you have to have capital. You have to have a decent amount of capital to get into the location, to have that. I don't want to call it a test run, but really like get that to market. What is your recommendation when you're not doing a franchise and you do have maybe a concept or you have a great chef? Like, what things do we want to be considering with costs right out the front that might not be so obvious that people don't consider and they're immediately like, failure?
So again, I think location
Mm-hmm.
is I unfortunately see a lot of times people will call me and they're like, hey, I opened up this restaurant 3-4 months ago. And like the second we get on the phone, it's like you failed the minute you sign that lease.
Mm.
And I hate saying that, but like there's not much we can do right now. And I know you've sunk a ton of capital in this and we're gonna work and we're gonna try, but like you wrote the deed to your destiny the minute you sign that lease. So I think location is number one. And I don't necessarily mean good, bad location. Good, bad are variables of who's our target market. What's our price point, right? You could have what we might look at and go, that's a terrible location in a terrible area, could be a rock star for one type of restaurant. And then another restaurant looks at that or looks at some other thing that's perfect, but that other restaurant wouldn't work there. So absolute number one is making sure that we have the right location. And the reason I brought that up in the capital conversation is because, like I said earlier, the right location might be more expensive than you were planning on. So you don't have enough capital. You go to the cheaper location to save money. Build outs are much more expensive than people think, especially in this post-COVID world, because build outs require a ton of labor and labor's gotten expensive. So build outs are going through the roof right now. My clients are like, restaurants that we could build out for 300,000-400,000 are coming in at 800,000-900,000.
Mm.
So build outs are out of control. And then just your like training, opening, and like figuring it out costs are always higher than people think. You cannot hire staff the day you open. So you will be burdening certain staff for a week or two ahead of open. You will be giving away a lot of food at the beginning to friends and family, soft openings. You need a ton of money to stock your restaurant with food and beer and wine and liquor. So I think those are all things that, people underestimate. I think they get a quote
Mm.
from a contractor and they think that quote's going to be firm. They don't put a 10 or 20% contingency on that. They look at a rent number, but they don't factor your landlord's going to want 6 months of security. So if you got a $5,000 a month piece of property, you're going to need to write them a check for 35,000 up front.
Mm.
Your utilities are going to want 1 to 2 years. So you may have a $300 or $400 a month electric bill. Your electricity company isn't going to turn on electricity till you write them a check for $5,000 or $10,000. Now they'll
Wow.
give that back to you in 2 years, but you're a brand new customer to them. They don't know who you are. They're not just going to fire off electricity to you and hope you're going to pay your bill. And that happens everywhere. Licenses, insurance, those are all upfront costs that 2 or 3 years down the road we can absorb, but those are capital intensive expenses day one or
Well,
day negative 100
yeah,
before you open, I
right.
should say.
Okay, well
Yeah.
let's talk about, like, we're a little further in on this. A little, we've made it through. We've created something really successful and we're actually profitable. At what point, like, what is the revenue benchmark when a restaurant should consider expanding and adding multiple locations?
So I think that there's no like revenue like industry wide because some restaurants are very successful at 800,000 or $1 million. Some restaurants would be out of business tomorrow at 800,000 or $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it really is I used to say this and I don't say it anymore. I used to say when your restaurant can operate completely independently, like you've built the systems, the processes, you've got management in place, and like you could literally disappear for like a week or two and your restaurant's fine, you're ready to scale. I don't say that anymore because we live in a world that moves a lot faster. So what I would say is when you're feeling good about your product and you believe, you truly, I shouldn't even say believe, you know it because you have market data and not just your friends have told you, but professionals who know what they're doing have told you that this is a concept that can duplicate. Not all concepts can duplicate. You might have gotten lightning in a bottle, and you got to know that. If you got lightning in a bottle, perfect concept, perfect location, perfect timing, and you took off, that doesn't mean you're duplicatable. Like, protect that, package it up, put it in a safe at night, but don't let
Mm-hmm.
that lightning out of the bottle. But if you truly do have a duplicatable concept and it will work in other locations, what I say now is like, go do it. Because the best way to figure out what systems you need is to distract yourself building another restaurant, figure out what broke and go fix it. before the next one opens, but while you're distracted with getting it open. So I move a little faster now. I'm pushing clients to get their second and their third and their fourth faster than I used to. So again, I don't think it's a revenue mark, but it is a financial health mark. The last thing I'll say on this, having another baby is not a great method for saving a bad marriage.
Mm-hmm.
If your restaurant is not doing well financially, a lot of people say to me, well, we're going to open up another location that's going to bring in all this extra revenue and we'll fix our financial problems. You will not fix your financial problems distracting yourself with another location, because that location brings a ton of expenses with it. So you have to be, maybe the easiest, fastest way I should have answered that question is when you're financially healthy and you believe all that other stuff. But if you're not financially healthy in location 1, location 2 is not going to fix it.
Good advice. Love that. So do you see a lot of the people you've worked with coming in to start the first already anticipating that they are going to have multiple locations, or is it kind of
everybody is, right?
Okay.
They use that stamp. Like we've all done it. And I used to do it too, of like, Ryan, I got this idea and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And once you get the first one open, we're going to stamp them out all over the country. I'm like, I love it. I love the enthusiasm. And I used to say the same thing. But again, if you want to open up a multi-unit concept, if that is your desire, you have to build that into the concept from the start. Certain concepts are duplicatable. Certain ones are not. Certain processes and techniques and products that we purchase are scalable. Certain are not. Like Chipotle that is a concept that was built from day one for duplicatability, for scalability. Kava, there's a lot of famous stories about the guys who started Kava. Like they went into that solving a business problem of we need we need more options for fast, healthy food in hundreds of thousands of locations around the country. So they built a concept for scale. They didn't build a concept and be like, wow, this is amazing. Let's go scale.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. I love it. All entrepreneurs are so ambitious, and sometimes that's very strategic, and sometimes it's just completely a hope and a prayer, which, both work sometimes, but
and we love it and we want that. And I get excited about it, but just run some tests in your head and with some really experienced people of, is this duplicatable? Like, is this really duplicatable, or do we need to be looking at simplifying?
Yeah. Okay. I hope everybody listening, even if you're not, I know that sometimes I listen to things, I watch TikTok videos, and I'm one of those people in the comments that's like, do I even have this? No, I don't. Did I watch the whole video? Yes, I did. So maybe people have listened that have no ambition or idea to start a restaurant, but there's so many universal truths that we have packed into this interview. So I appreciate all of that. Just to tie everything up with a bow, and some of this might be a little just summarizing things that you've already said. But if we're talking to a current restaurant owner who's listening today, who wants to improve profitability and they want to prepare for scaling, what are a few specific actions they could take this week that will start moving them in the right direction?
Yeah, I think just, build 5 systems this week. Like literally, like I don't care if you got 10, build 5 more. I don't care if you got 0, build 5 more. I don't care if you got 100, build 5 more. But like, you are going to need the systems, the processes, and the procedures. The other thing I would say is the client I was just on the phone with before we started this was, they're about to open up their 3rd location, and they're doing a great job of listening to the things we're talking about as I've worked with them on the 2 biggest areas I see scaled businesses struggle: human resources. And I don't mean like sitting down and having, coaching conversations or sitting down and writing someone up. I mean like human resources, understanding what makes humans drive, what gets them excited, the psychology, why they do the things they do, how to be a great leader, how to be a great mentor, how to be a great coach. Like, you have to become a psychologist. You have to become the world's best practical psychologist if you're going to scale. Because no matter what we talked about, machines and kiosks, you are going to need a lot of people to build and grow a restaurant. So you better be great at understanding human behavior and developing humans. The second part is finances. Like, you can outsource marketing. You can outsource cooking. You can outsource recipe development. That stuff's easy. Guys like me could come into your restaurant. I could write you a whole menu and give you every recipe you want in like 2 hours. Like,
Mm.
that is not hard. Making money is hard. Understanding debt, understanding finance, understanding credit cards, understanding balance sheets, understanding P&Ls, understanding tax laws. That is hard. And that's hard to outsource when you're even small to medium. When you're huge, that's different. But you better get good. You better go this week and read a book on understanding small business finance and human being leadership. And you better read like one of those books a week for like the next year.
Okay, good to know. I love it. You've brought some good practical tips and understanding into an industry that I don't think we've ever done an episode about. So I appreciate all of that. And again,
Awesome.
grateful for the universality of everything that you've shared with us today. It's so helpful. I've learned a ton, good hard lessons that I think sometimes as, hopeful entrepreneurs we need to hear. So always appreciate the real talk. It's been so fun to chat with you. Thank you. Ryan, where can people check out more, learn from you if they're in this industry or even if they're not? What's the best place to connect with you?
Absolutely. So the restaurantboss.com is where you could watch a ton of my videos. You can see them on YouTube if you just do the Restaurant Boss. But the restaurantboss.com, I got tons of resources. I got a free toolkit with tons of spreadsheets and examples of systems and examples of processes and examples of everything we talked about, P&Ls, chart of accounts, exactly all that stuff. I've got some courses on there. I've got a membership on there. You can get my book for free called Make It Happen at the Restaurant Boss, or I am also the founder of and a developer and partner in a software company called ClickBacon. So clickbacon.com, which handles all of the finance side of your restaurant, the food cost, the labor cost, all the stuff that we talked about here. It's a great tool. So yeah, the restaurantboss.com or clickbacon.com.
Love
And
it.
reach out. Like, let me know. Shoot support at the restaurantboss.com a message. Listen to the podcast, Ryan. Loved it. Just wanted to say hello. Love it. We'd love to hear from you.
Cool. Thanks again, Ryan. You've been fantastic, and we're so grateful that you've come and shared all the knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. I love it, and I love if one person can take one thing from this and go do it, then that makes my day. So
Amen.
let's go out there and kick some butt.
Let's do it, guys. Thanks again.